Okay, YouTube says I'm live, so I'm live. It's 2 o'clock Tuesday. Time for breakdown. So yeah, welcome to Tuesday. It is August 8th, and today I'm going to break down Sunday's service, the message, the music, what went on here, and also the week before, since I was not available to do this breakdown last week. So we're going to cover the Super Sunday at the end of July, where Ali and I got to teach on the end of Acts chapter 2, what does a church look like? And then this last Sunday, which was the continuing series on expectant prayer, particularly praying for the city. So, want to talk about that. I don't have a lot of other topics today. There's a lot going on, a lot of wheels spinning in my life right now, but nothing I really feel like I want to just ramble about to the camera just yet. So if you have suggestions and want to chime in, let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to do a little bit of a breakdown. So 2 weeks ago was our Super Sunday, and I want to talk a little bit about Super Sundays. We want, and we have been wanting, for our two cultures, language cultures, the Latino part of our church and the English part of our church, to integrate as much as possible. So when it comes to working in a multicultural environment in a local church, there's a lot of strategies that are out there. The most popular one, at least when I was growing up and in my early years of ministry, the most popular one has always been you have an Anglo church that has a building or property. You have a Spanish church that is an entity unto itself that does not have a building or property. And so they rent space. And so a lot of churches, if you're driving down the street and you see, will have, first whatever church meets here. And then there'll be a little sign, Iglesia de Camino, or some Spanish name of a separate church that meets on that property. Now, it's not just Spanish churches that do this. A lot of church plants also get started by sharing space with another established church. So that's kind of the main way that you get this partnership between more of a Hispanic Latino population and more of the English churches. And that's one option. Another option is that basic layout, but a little more partnered, where maybe the leader of that Latino ministry will be a part-time staffer of the Anglo church, but it'll still be under a different name or a different way of doing it. But maybe there's a little more overlap. For example, there's a free church down in Aurora, a very great church. It's been there for a long time, called New Life. And the pastor there realized that the culture where they were in Aurora was changing, and it was a lot of white flight was leaving, and not just Latino, but all sorts of cultures and languages and races were coming into those neighborhoods there in kind of central Aurora. And so what they did is they figured out kind of a hybrid model, because not only did they have Latinos, they had Ethiopian refugees, and they had Somali groups that were there, and they had some African American churches and people who wanted that style. And then they had, I think the list is up to like 32 nationalities now that are in and out of that church on a regular basis. And so what they've done is they kind of have two tiers of how they partner with these different ethnicities. One, which is more like where I'm getting to with what we're doing with Ali and Grace Latino. But the second tier is what I was just talking about now, where it's its own entity, but it still overlaps. And so occasionally you do meals together. You do maybe a Thanksgiving service here or there where you're combining with the people of that group. But there's still two separate entities that meet in the same building. And a lot of times how this will take place is you have your English services Sunday morning, and then the other ethnicity comes in afternoon and does it that way. And in some of these different cultures, that's normal to do afternoon services. So generally it works out, and it can work out great. We had a relationship in the past with a setup like that out of the Free Church down in Littleton, Bethany Evangelical Free Church, which I have a lot of history with, and their former senior pastor is one of my best friends. His name's Kevin Navarro, and Kevin had a relationship with a Latino preacher who had gone to seminary and was planting a Spanish-speaking free church using their facility. And his name's Francisco. Francisco's on the radio. He's a radio preacher in Spanish. He's got a big ministry down in Mexico. And Dave has a great question here. I'm going to answer it in a second. The idea, though, of what they had in their partnership was that Francisco's ministry was Francisco's ministry, and Bethany Church was Bethany Church. But they worked together. They shared space. Anyway, Francisco had people who were a part of his ministry who lived in Longmont, and they would commute down on Sundays to Littleton to worship with that ministry there. But then they would try to do small groups up here in Longmont during the week. And we tried different varieties of incorporating them into what we do. But in the long run, it was essentially we were sharing space, not really sharing church. And we kept praying because we thought we want to do this right. And 30% of Longmont is Latino. 30% of our church was not. And different people have different theories on this. And is it ever realistic in today's day and age to really integrate fully and be multicultural? Can you do that? How can you do that? Do you have to basically burn down what you had before in order to get there? What about all the political implications? And there's all sorts of difficulties that you face if you want to head down that path. And I don't think we ever really cared about any of those. It was just a matter of, Lord, if this is what you have for us, we're ready. We would love to reflect our community better. But we want it to be a legitimate partnership, not just renting space. And then, because then you still have big brother, little brother syndrome, and never wanted that. So when the Lord brought us Ali and Anna and the group that they had, and they walked in and said, we don't want to rent space. We want a church. We want your elders to be our elders. We want your children's ministry to be our children's ministry. It kind of reminded me of the Ruth and Naomi story in the Old Testament. When Ruth's husband, Naomi's son, died, and Ruth goes to Naomi and said, your God is my God. Your people will be my people. And so I kind of felt like that partnership was there. And then it was just, well, let's keep working on this integration. Let's figure it out. There wasn't really a roadmap for it. And as I mentioned, that church in Aurora, they have done that with a couple of the multicultural things they have going on there. But they were the only people I knew of who had even kicked the tires on this idea. But we worked on it, and it's been a tremendous success because of the hearts of everyone involved. But we can do more, and we need to keep doing more. I was reminded again, we did our quarterly reports here in July, which we do quarterly, and we didn't translate them into Spanish. And there's no excuse. We just didn't think of it. You know, we have signs on the wall when people come in, and yeah, most Latino people who live here know what bathroom means on an English sign, but it can communicate so much that not only are we glad you're here, but like, we're really glad you're here. Little things like that, putting a little Spanish word on that sign as well, putting the quarterly reports multilingual. But anyway, at the very least, we are committed and will continue to be committed to the 4 Sundays a year that are the 5th Sunday of their month. That Sunday is going to be a combined worship service. Maybe we should do more. The challenges that come with that are somewhat, they do exist. There are challenges. But anyway, I love that we get to do that. And I love that we got to do it. And every time we do it, it's exciting in different ways. Tag teaming a sermon. I know I've talked about that on these breakdowns in the past before. That's always a unique, and I'm getting to be more comfortable in doing that. But of course, Eileen is just a rock star at translating them. Before I forget, Dave's comment, Pastor Jeff, what's the best way to describe to people what free means when you tell them you attend an evangelical free church? So when I tell people about Evangelical Free Church of America, which is our association, it's kind of weird because evangelical is such a loaded term politically right now. And I don't mean it that way. And we at Grace Church don't mean it that way. It is not a Republican term, it's not a political term. Historically, it is the term that means we take the Bible literally. We take the Bible as the sole authority. Evangelicalism back in the 50s really poured its roots down on we believe that the Bible is the Word of God and that people need to hear and surrender to the gospel to be saved. Evangelicalism was rooted on that. Now, over the course of the 70s, 80s, 90s, and all the way up to today, different proponents of evangelicalism, different famous evangelicals, kind of sold their souls to turn it into a political entity, which is not the intention of Grace Church, of me, or of the Evangelical Free Church of America. In fact, there is a great, the president of our association read a document at the national conference last month that I think I've talked about it in maybe a Tuesday breakdown, maybe it's a Thursday announcement, about what we as an association think about current political things. And it was brilliant. Whoever wrote it, it was genius. And there's a link to it on our website. And if I remember, I'll put a link to it at the bottom of this video as well. But anyway, so evangelical, you kind of have to talk through what you mean by that. And then, of course, evangelical free, if you put those two words together, I mean, the joke has long been, is that like sugar free? Like if I go to that church, I will be free from evangelicals. And I guess in some cases that might be appealing to people. I don't know. But no, that's not what free means. The free part of our Evangelical Free Church of America means independent governance. So this goes back all the way to the Reformation, where you had state churches, and there was always the wars between, like, even famous ones in England. Are we going to be Catholic? Are we going to be Protestant nationally? So let's fight a big war over it. You know, when Henry VIII wanted to divorce his wife, he decided to form a church all unto itself in England. That was kind of Catholic, but also kind of Protestant, but it meant he could divorce his wife. And that's where we get Anglicanism and the Church of England. Anyway, those kind of debates, as Protestantism was spreading through Europe, sorry, Dave, you're getting a super long answer. I'll give you the short answer when I'm done with this. After that was all spreading throughout Europe, different countries would pick either we're going to be a part of the Holy Roman Empire and stay Catholic and honor the Pope and all these things, or we're going to go full state church is going to be Protestant. And in a lot of those countries, that their blood was shed over that. But eventually, once the state church had established, let's say, Protestantism, for example, in Scandinavia, this happened, where they adopted Lutheranism as kind of the state church. There were pockets of Christians who now had the Bible in their own language, thanks to the Reformation and the printing press, who thought national church is a bad idea. We want to govern ourselves. And so they started being known as, you could be a part of the state church or you could be part of the free church. And doctrinally, they could be pretty close, but there was still this kind of differentiation of governance. We either belong to the bigger state organization or we are independently free to govern ourselves. Fast forward to the Western expanse, colonialism and all that, and now you have these denominations showing up in America trying to parse this all out. And of course, in America, you have in the very First Amendment that Congress shall make no religion a state religion. So in essence, every denomination governs itself, but some denominations, like Lutheranism or Presbyterianism or some Baptists, they would come with this kind of top-down model of you have your presbyter and then you have your overseer and then you have your local church, and everybody not only has to agree doctrinally, but everybody kind of goes up the ladder to somebody at the national level who can kind of be in charge. The Evangelical Free Church of America was one that said, no, we're going to be locally independent, because who knows best how to govern the local church besides the local church? But we will have an affiliation based on similar doctrines. And so there's this interdependence that goes with independent governance. And that's really how the Free Church, the EFCA, has been built. So we're a part of that in the sense that we share the doctrine with the Evangelical Free Church of America. I have connections with them, including the ones I've talked about already today down in Littleton. And that's a wonderful thing. But at the end of the day, nobody from the national office, and we have one in Minneapolis, gets to come into our local church here in Longmont and force a decision of governance. Part of affiliating with the Evangelical Free Church of America is saying we are membership governed. We are locally governed within the local church, not somebody from the outside. So that's the very long answer. Short answer, evangelical, we believe the Bible is true and people need to believe in Jesus to be saved. Free, we govern ourselves. And I should have just led with that, because did he really care about all the rest of that stuff? I don't know. But it's in my cabeza, so I need to get it out sometimes when I'm asked that kind of question. Anyhow, what was I talking about? Oh, Super Sunday. I don't know if Super Sunday is the right word for it, but it's a way to kind of differentiate when we are merging in worship with Grace Latino. I was talking to Pastor Ali today. What we wanted to do from the get-go was be one church. And we still have a long way to go. We're still learning. Like I've mentioned, the signage. I would like to see more of our English-speaking attenders go to their service, go to the Grace Latino in Spanish service. You know, if you have you can get Google Translate on your phone. And I've done this where I've got my Google Translate going. And so it's taking in whatever Ali is saying and kicking it back out to me in English. And I can follow along with the sermon pretty well. So it might be nice to see even more of that cross-pollination, even outside of Super Sundays. But it is great to be influenced by them and to see how we can honor them and they can honor us. And I keep saying they and us, but that's kind of the point, is we don't want to use those terms anymore because we're one church. And that's why I'm trying to learn Spanish, because I think, okay, if our congregation is 20 to 30% Spanish speaking now, by God's grace, I want to be able to talk to those people if I'm the pastor of this church. So I'm working on it. Not great, but I'm trying. So we talked about the church. I asked Ali, I said, what do you want to talk about? What do you want the sermon to be about? Should we stick with the prayer series? Is there something specific on your heart you want to share with everybody of both languages there? And he was the one who came up with the end of Acts 2. And the idea that it was really on his heart was theology is super important, and we have it here. But that theology moving to action is something he's passionate about. And so it was, let's look at the example of the early church that was merging all of these various cultures together, because they all came to Christ at the Feast of Pentecost from all sorts of regions around the world, the known world at that time. And what did they do to kind of bond together across cultural barriers? And even, we didn't talk about it, but even thinking about, I think The Chosen does a good job of dramatizing this, of, you know, what we know of the 12 apostles, they were not lockstep on their worldviews before they met Jesus, and maybe even after. You know, Simon the Zealot, we know he was a zealot, and we know the zealots of that time wanted to take up arms against Rome. And then you have Matthew, the tax collector, who was outwardly working for Rome against the Jews in collecting taxes. Well, they had to eat around the campfire together. So when we talk about kind of the merging of cultures, it's not just Jews and non-Jews in the early church. It's ideologies and worldviews, and you got fishermen from Galilee who, you know, they're sharing being disciples with, again, somebody like Matthew, who worked with money all the time. Or later on, you have guys like Luke, who was a physician, and they're all working together. You have Paul, who was the Pharisee of Pharisees, and he had to go and have meetings with James, who was kind of the leader of the church at Jerusalem. And he was he was the half brother of Jesus. So he grew up, I guess, a carpenter's son as well. Anyhow, the beauty of the church is the point that it connects throughout all of these things. and it overcomes those worldly walls of separation. Paul calls them walls of separation in Ephesians 2. And so Ali said, yeah, I really want to go back to the basics. And so that's what we did. So he actually wrote that whole sermon. Sometimes as we've been doing the Super Sundays, he'll write half, and then we'll try and make him meet somewhere in the middle. Or I'll write the whole thing and I'll say, why don't you take this middle chunk, and gives him a few days to kind of process it. That's what we did this time, but it was the opposite. He wrote it all and he said, why don't you take this middle chunk? And I was able then to make it my own. But that way we're not preaching two separate sermons, which we've done in the past on Super Sundays, unintentionally, where we each have different points we want to make. And poor Eileen is just getting whiplash, not just linguistically, but also ideologically. So we're trying to we're learning as we go. And that's how we did that. It's always fun to have the music in two languages, although I know some people find it awkward. I find it glorious and gloriously awkward. I just like when we, as a congregation, in our time of worship, have to pay attention and lock into what we're doing. And I think it was Edward who said, small glimpse of heaven when you have all these languages represented worshiping the Lord. So I do enjoy that. Plus, I get to practice my Spanish. And then this last Sunday, flashing forward to 2 days ago, it was my turn. It had been a while since I had preached. So I mentioned this before in a Tuesday breakdown. When Gino and I planned this series, we picked the things about prayer we wanted to talk about, the specific things about prayer we wanted to talk about. And then we just kind of threw it on the calendar. And in the end, I think it's a 9-week series, and I'm doing 5 and he's doing 4. But it just so happened that, how did this work out? Anyway, he did his 2, and then we had Super Sunday. And so I hadn't been in the pulpit preaching kind of just me with the sermon I had written in a month. So it was fun to get back up there. And we had a funeral Saturday. And it was, not all funerals are created equal. When it's somebody's child, it's extra. When it's somebody who's been in the church for 35 years, it's extra. When a lot of that person's friends are unchurched and they're going to be there, that's extra. And I got to say, this is going to sound weird, I love doing funerals, not because I want that scenario, but because it's a time when people are listening. They're sensitive to the gospel in ways they might otherwise not be. And it really is, to me, how do I want to say this? It's almost the crown jewel of being a pastor, is being invited into people's major moments in their lives. So weddings, baby dedications, hospital visits, funerals. The fact that somebody would invite me into those major moments in their lives, I never take that for granted. And I feel like it really is, if you strip away everything else in my job and in the stuff we talk about here on these breakdowns, that will never change and should never change. The opportunity to meet somebody in those moments is a privilege and an honor that those are the words that always come to mind. And it was again this time. But it also meant, okay, I have 3 Sundays in a row where I'm not preaching. Or when I preached with Ali, it was, a third of the sermon. And even that was being translated. So that, again, I'm glad I got to do it. I love doing it. I love those services. Not crazy heavy lifting for me on that part of my job. Whereas this, of all the weekends for this to happen, it happened this weekend, and then the next day I'm back in the pulpit. I guess that's my point. But the Lord gave me strength, and there was definitely a point of, well, yeah, it would have been easier if Gina was preaching this Sunday instead of one of the others. But you know what? It's fine. It's the job, and it's an honor to have that job and to do that job. And I was thinking too about friends who are CPAs, and when it's tax season, it's just tax season. Like if you're not prepared for that, why are you a CPA, right? So when funerals happen, they happen. That's the job. And if you're not prepared for that, why are you a pastor? So I actually had a lot of clarity, and my synapses were firing Saturday morning for the funeral, which went really, really well. And I was just, again, honored to be a part of it and to see how much the Lord blessed it. But then to turn around and then on Sunday do the prayer for the city was it was just a little extra, but I was able to process sequentially what I had to do. And so I had written this on Wednesday of last week, the prayer for the city sermon. And I went right back to the Jeremiah 29, which was our vision sermon from January. And I thought, I'm not going to pretend it wasn't. Let's just acknowledge, hey, we're halfway through the year, a little more than halfway through the year. So let's bring it back up. Let's bring it back to the forefront of our minds. This is what God's word says. This has been the theme of the year, exile, and how do we carry ourselves in exile. And we did the whole Daniel series that way. We're going to do a little bit more of that this fall in Thessalonians. So let's double down on it now and really talk about this idea of we need to seek the welfare of the city. And how do we do that? Well, first and foremost, it says pray on behalf of the city. So I kind of felt like this really could be more interactive. I didn't need to come up with the list for everybody of what to pray for our city. And of course, realizing too, I don't know how many people in the room are from Frederick, or I know we have a family from Fort Lupton. I know we have a family from Lyons. I know we have people from Meade and Berthoud and South Loveland. And so I don't want to just say the city of Longmont, but obviously it kind of is, and then the surrounding areas. But because of that, I thought I don't have to script everything out, not that I do anyway, but I can leave open sections for interactivity. What do you guys think are the problems in our city that need to be prayed for? And then let's just stop and pray. And which is what I kind of want this series to be anyway. So that's good. The music side was really fun. Again, this kind of summer rotation of leadership, who's in town, and we have different band types. And so Jeffrey and Jackie, they led worship at their wedding reception, which is awesome. And Justin, Jackie's brother, is a regular on our worship teams doing drums. And we actually have, I think, the last rotation before summer, the week one team also had Jackie and her mom and Justin. It was kind of the Buchanan week on the music team. So it's nice to have Jeffrey be able to lead with his wife and brother-in-law. And I walked in Sunday morning at about 8, and they were kind of finishing up. And I thought to myself, boy, a couple piano notes here and there to add color could really help. Not that there was anything wrong with what they were doing, but an acoustic guitar, if it's the only real instrument, is really a rhythm instrument, not a tonal instrument at that point. And of course, Justin's, he's great with the percussion stuff. But I just thought, I'm just going to sit here at the piano and just play little random notes. I don't need charts. I'm not leading any of the songs. I'm just going to add color. And so I was goofing off with that as they finished up their sound check. And then we're leaving to get water or bathroom break or whatever before the service actually starts, I said, hey, do you guys mind if I do that during the service? And I think it was Jeffrey's like, do what? I said, sit at the piano, he's like, you did that? So it was fun because I wasn't in their way and nobody stopped me from just kind of being there. And it was really fun for me to contribute to the corporate worship without being in charge and even without being noticed. And the tech team didn't set up any camera angles on me, which was ideal. I wouldn't want to be there anyway during the music. So I just had a blast. And I don't know if anybody else noticed or cared, but this is my breakdown. So that's what happened. And it wasn't planned. It wasn't rehearsed. I just kind of, I don't know. Would that be pushing my way in? I don't think I overstepped. Maybe I did. But I enjoyed it. And if I did, I'm sorry. But it seemed fine and it seemed fun. And then afterwards, we had a ministry leader meeting, which I got to lead as well, which was a good kind of pre-fall vision reminder and some big picture things as we head into the next season around here. And that was very well attended. And always a great time to kind of gather the 30 to 40 people who are responsible for ministries in our church and just get them all on the same page and encourage each other and celebrate victories that have happened. And so we do that a couple times a year as well. And so to me, one of the things we talked about, and I'll end with this. We talked about at the ministry leaders meeting this maintenance versus impact grid. And so much in our lives, and certainly in church, things are really high maintenance or can be high maintenance, but maybe not have the impact we thought. But we feel like we have to keep doing them because that's what you do. And I was trying to encourage them. I said, no, the goal is low maintenance and high impact. That's the sweet spot of ministry. That's the sweet spot of, I think, life. Sometimes you have to be high maintenance to get the impact you need, and that's okay too. What you don't want is the high maintenance, low impact, or the low maintenance, low impact, because then it doesn't feel like you're doing anything. But I really enjoyed this last Sunday because I felt like a lot of it was low maintenance and high impact. I didn't have to write 45 minutes of a compelling sermon. I just got to the text and we talked about it and we prayed about it and we all worked together. So on my end, it was kind of low maintenance, but it was high impact for the church. Similarly, sitting down at the piano, super low maintenance, but I thought it was impactful and fun. So that's what I'm always aiming at. And that's my, I guess, free advice for you guys today. Chris didn't notice till the closing songs. Well, good. I am happy to have been not visible until I needed to be. Anyhow, thanks for watching. Thanks for the comments. If you are coming on now and you missed some of the earlier stuff, of course, you can head back. I answered Dave's question that was here. Thanks for commenting and asking the questions. I'll be back next Tuesday. Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. You're awesome. Those of you who are watching now, you're awesome. Those of you who watch later. And if you never watch it, you are also awesome, made in the image of God. And I hope somebody tells you. Thanks.